I'm paranoid and I'm tripping and smoking and drinking. Whatever the rest of the song is.
Okay. I'm going to have an apple while we do this, if that's all right. All right, to be determined. Friday show. Back after popular demand. Episode 7. We took a week off.
That we did. Skeg just got a skeg.
We got a little caught up.
Happens. Oh. Good time for some vitamins, I guess.
Just give me a minute. All right. So an interesting week unfolding.
It's a quick minute.
I'm going to be rude and just eat while we do this. I got a lot of things to do. We got to keep it moving here. We got to keep it moving. The lead. Sabres hiring a new head coach, Phil Housley. Were you out there for the press?
I was. I was in the pavilion there. I think they called it, even though it's the little setup they have in the lobby. It's beautiful. It's beautiful stuff.
What did you make of the press conference? What did you make of the what is it, the 18th head coach in Sabres history now?
He was just giddy. My colleague from 13 WHAM TV in Rochester, Jenna. Oh, I always mispronounce her name. I almost did it again. Jenna Cottrell. I almost went Cottrell on her. She asked just about just him, not really X's and O's. Asked him about coming back, a little full circle action there with the Sabres, with the organization, and he was just giddy. Just giddy. That's, I think, the best way to describe it. It's good to see. It's really good to see.
Former 6th overall pick by the Sabres back in the, 80s?
He was a star.
He came out of high school like 165 pounds, so an unusual draft pick, but a guy that played, over 20 years?
Oh, my gosh.
In the league. Let me pull up his draft. The old hockey DB. So the 82 draft. So this guy got drafted before you and I were even born.
Yeah, well, we're basically in different generations, the two of us. You're much older than I am. So there's that as well.
That is not true. We're both millennials.
You know what millennials do sometimes? They leave on the humidifier. That's probably what you're hearing. I left it on. It's pretty close. Pretty excited about it. Pretty excited I left it on.
So Housley, a guy that started, and as you mentioned yesterday, he reverted back after his career ended in 02-03 with Chicago and Toronto. Played one game for the Maple Leafs, and then went into retirement. He collected over, 1,200 points during his NHL career as a defenseman, mind you, and played in almost 1,500 games. So he was almost a point-a-game defenseman, which is impressive.
Jeez.
Went back to high school to start his coaching career. He didn't start in the NHL. And a lot of those guys, especially a guy like Housley, who, again, had a very productive, I don't want to call it historic, but he was a very productive defenseman during his day. A lot of times those guys find their way in the AHL to begin with and then work their way up. This guy went all the way back to high school. So respect to Phil Housley, caught on with the Preds in 2013 and has been there for the past 4 seasons.
That's what one of my big takeaways was as well, is the fact to hear him call back to his coaching start in high school. I think in any really professional sport or just major sport in general, you see with the Auburn head coach for football right now, Gus Malzahn, did something, and that was very out of the ordinary for him too. But that is such a good story coming up, the fact that high school, it didn't really take him that long. I was surprised to hear you say that he played in this millennium, the fact that he played in this in the 2000s here. So it was 2002, 2003.
It was, so he broke into the league in 82, 83. So he basically had a 20-year career in the NHL, which is amazing. That is difficult to do. I'm interested to know, I didn't get to see the press conference. What did new GM Jason Bottrill have to say about the hire?
Oh, Jason is such a positive guy. He was never going to. Plus, this is his hire. He was never going to waver.
I'm imagining.
I think he liked the fact that he's a Buffalo guy. which is the fact with Jason. He's a guy with the Amerks and whatnot. I think he just likes keeping in the family, keep with Buffalo guys. You hear that a lot with going back to college football with Michigan guys before Harbaugh got hired. I think that's not necessarily a bad thing for Pegula to be instilling, at least with the Sabres, is to be getting Buffalo guys back here, because I think that's something that this fan base and just Buffalo fans of professional sports teams in general really latch onto.
Well, that's a great point, Matty, because because you're out there and you're covering these things. But Western New York, and I'm including Rochester in that because Rochester's very much included in that, they live and die with their sports teams, and in particular hockey. And look no further than this year's ratings of the Stanley Cup Final.
Oh.
Pittsburgh's 1, Nashville's 2, and Buffalo's 3. And it was like that for the 3 years that I lived in Rochester. Buffalo was always number 3, no matter what two cities were in there, and sometimes they were competing for number 2 ahead of one of the teams that was in the Stanley Cup Final. It's amazing to me how rabid the fans are, but it does speak to, when you say bringing back the alumni to then, be part of this organization, those are the guys that understand what this region is all about. I don't know that Dan Bilesma ever understood that.
Yeah. Well, and from a Jason Bottrill standpoint, GM bringing in guys, he wants to bring in guys that are along with that kind of vibe. And then if they don't already have that, maybe if they're coming through the system or they're already in the system coming up from past GMs, TMGM there,
yep.
Then you have Housley will try to instill that vibe into guys that don't already have it. So I think it's going to be, it should be good. The vibe, I keep saying vibe. The vibe is good right now. We'll see if it.
It always is. It always is during a press conference. What's the one takeaway you had from that conference?
I'll just go back to it again. Just the fact that, not childlike in a negative term, but just a childlike sense of wonder, like a Christmas morning. He's back. This is a organization that gave him a lot, and he's back.
Yeah,
he's back. I think he was so excited not only get a head coaching job, but have this be the first one.
And I think the owner mentioned something about, Terry Pegula mentioned something about watching him play during the press conference.
I mean, I don't remember every aspect of it. It was a pretty long press conference. But
it was.
I agree.
I caught a nugget or two just on social media, just to bring it full circle. I thought it was funny. Why should fans be excited about the hire? It's, 1, a Buffalo guy, as you mentioned. 2, I mentioned that he worked his way up. But 3, the fact that he's a defensive coach. And in today's NHL, finding defensemen, young defensemen that are talented, that's where you go. It's not the equivalent of finding a quarterback in the NFL, but it's the equivalent of finding, I guess, a good tight end or talented wide receivers. You need those skill guys. The way the NHL is run now, it's all through the defense. It's all done defensively. This team right now, in my mind, and we've said this before, really has 3 defensemen. And one of them wasn't even playing last year. Ristolainen's your go-to, and we talked with Fox Matthew Collar about him. Matthew's a huge fan of Ristolainen and what he brings to the table, having watched him all the way back from when he was with the Rochester Americans. And I remember those days too. McCabe has earned his way into being a top 6 guy that dresses every night. And then Brendan Gooley.
Phil loves him.
Well, that's good.
Well, Gooley as well, but Phil really loves McCabe. I just wanted to add that quick. Back to you.
No, but that's good. That's good that you brought that up because it's something we didn't get from, just the outside fans. And really, I was kind of like an outside fan yesterday because normally I'm plugged into it, but I was not, I'll be honest.
But speaking of defensemen, I mean, one of my big takeaways as well was PK Subban, and not necessarily because he was defenseman that played into it, but he was so good at dealing with PK Subban, who is people we're talking about. I know Tom Martin, who we've had on before, AFOTS from WIVB in Buffalo. He said he's an electric, and I think, like, an electric personality. I mean, he's somebody, he had his issues with the Canadians. So I guess there's a little bit of underlying explanation to go along with that. But Jack Eichel, you can't say he didn't have anything to do with the Dan Bylsma departure from the Buffalo Sabres. And this is another, we'll say, electric personality. And I definitely agree with that description by Mr. Martin.
See, I think the personalities are significantly different between PK and Jack.
But yes, in terms of their role and the fact that it's so big, and arguably a young age for Jack Eichel, he's not the same age as PK Subban, but within that locker room, that was a bunch of questions asked about that, and a bunch of takeaways afterwards were Jack Eichel, huge star, big role in the locker room. Same with PK Subban. He dealt with PK Subban very well. Let's see if he can do the same with Jack Eichel.
That's superstar mentality. I think that's what you're getting towards. I understand now. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, Just the fact that he's big both on and off the ice.
Yeah, and listen, I think there's a couple of those guys in the Sabres locker room. It remains to be seen. I mean, we've got the expansion draft coming up next Wednesday, and then the NHL draft, the following Friday? So it's back-to-back here. There's going to be pieces gone from this Sabres team. The front runners, I think, include Evander Kane, who could be gone via trade. Tyler Ennis, I think, is a guy that his name gets floated out there. GMTM went about shaping this roster how he saw fit. And as we've discovered, it was an old-style defensive crew, which does not mesh in today's NHL. Look no further than Nashville, where Phil Housley comes from. Those guys are young, athletic. They're not the big, brutal defensemen that we've seen in the past. I mean, PK Subban's a bigger guy, but Ryan Ellis is not. And Ryan Ellis was arguably the best defenseman in the Stanley Cup final. So it's a different breed. The Sabres had one of those guys, and they traded him away. So I don't know where this team goes from a roster standpoint. It's going to be interesting, though. It's going to be very interesting where Botterill decides to go. I think they go defenseman in the draft, but that defenseman likely won't be ready for 2-3 years. So they need an immediate impact. I think they'll use this draft to shuffle some pieces, and I hope they trade for a top 4 defenseman because they need it. And there's not many on the market.
You would love Pesek back. I know it.
I love Mark Pesek. He was a genuine guy in the locker room. He would always shoot you straight. Not the biggest talker. You wouldn't talk your ear off.
That's a good way to describe it. Like, I don't necessarily think he wanted to talk, but he's a straight shooter. When you asked him to talk, in particular, when he had to come back down from the Sabres after breaking his foot, and he did a quick rehab stint in Rochester, there was a different maturity level from when he was in Rochester before as an AHL player, a very frustrated AHL player because he should have been in the NHL. And when he got to the big leagues, and I think he got a confidence about him. It was a different nature when he came back. And Mark will do great things in the NHL, I have no doubt about it, because his vision, his speed, and his hockey sense. Again, not the most physically intimidating guy, but he knows where to put his body on any defensive play. He knows he can make that tape-to-tape pass, 100-foot tape-to-tape pass if need be. He is the modern NHL defenseman. And you had that piece, and your former GM gave him up. For not much, mind you. It was not a good trade. Florida, Miami, whatever it is, they won that trade. They did. So, interesting press conference. I'm excited for Housley. I think fans should be excited for Housley is the bottom line. Let's move to the Buffalo Bills. They end minicamp, so 6 weeks off until training camp, and then the camp schedule released. Did you get out to minicamp at all? I did. That's where I was before. It was definitely a hectic day for at least, well, actually, really both Rochesterians and Buffalonians in the not like they're necessarily from Buffalo or Rochester, everybody. But long story short,
they live there now.
You worked in the media, in the sports media yesterday. You started off at the last minicamp day. Then 6 weeks, we got training camp. It was pretty crazy because you were probably going to this press conference. So, yes, I hit up both of those. I was one of those.
What were the takeaways from the final session of minicamp? It sounded like Tyrod was doing much better.
Yeah, this is the first time I think in OTAs. I'm not quite sure about their Tuesday days, so they're different kind of camp days before training camp. I think it was the first time that they did passing drills while the media could be watching and filming, where they were going red zone. So where they're having stuff go to the end zone, which you want to see the most. I mean, I know it's just practice, but that's pretty applicable to at least excitement about a team going into the actual season.
An area where we know Buffalo struggled and has struggled in recent years, so...
I really liked Zay Jones, and he started off talking about Tyrod, going back to him for a second.
Yeah.
Did not go well. I think maybe the first, I don't know if it was Andre Holmes or Sammy Watson that started off the drill, at least for Tyrod tossing it. Mm-hmm. But one of the first, I will say, Tyrod tossed a little bit high on Sammy, and he went into some equipment, and it was a little bit sketchy for a second.
Sammy did.
Yes. But he ended up not tripping as much as he could have. It ended up being no real big deal because it is just an OTA.
Okay.
But my biggest takeaway from it probably in general, besides Sammy, he's always going to make the crazy catches. Made one kind of like right here. Hopefully that got picked up. I
think this. I constantly think, and my hands are always out here.
It's like kind of just behind his shoulder blade. But it was Zay Jones. Zay Jones was an animal. Zay Jones was an animal in this drill.
Interesting. So red zone, he looked good.
Yes.
You know that I have not been enthused with Zay Jones, and it's nothing against Zay. It's just a wait and see. That's all it is with me. I just want to wait and see. Listen, players can look significally better in OTAs and minicamp because a tenth of the playbook is in. There's no pads. It's a different. There are guys, and I was one of them, that were tremendous practice players, and it could never translate to the games. So my mentality is week 4. I want to get to week 4 with Zay Jones and then figure out where we are. Does he have the potential? Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind he has the potential to be a great receiver. He had almost 200 catches his senior year. So it's a guy that knows how to at least handle the rock and get open. You have to be able to get open and make those catches. But I want to wait and see. I don't want to get too... I think Buffalo fans tend to get a little too hyped. I remember when Sammy Watkins came in and people were thinking, oh my God, Sammy's going to bring us to the playoffs. And no one thought, well, hey, who's the Jamoke throwing him the ball? That kind of matters before we even get to how crazy Sammy Watkins, crazy good Sammy Watkins can be.
You watch your language.
Sorry.
You watch your language with that Jamoke. And somebody who has been really...
That Jamoke is now, a former first-round draft pick, is now a backup in Oakland, okay? So, it's all right. Continue.
Who's this?
Ijwa.
Oh, yes. Okay.
The other one's out of the league. I don't know where Thad Lewis is these days. And Jeff Toole. Has anyone seen Jeff Toole? I rest my case. All right, go ahead.
He's probably doing better right now than Thad Lewis. I don't know. Who knows about that? But Andre Holmes was in these kind of practices, these little camps, before the big one, the big training camp there at St. John Fisher College in Rochester. Andre Holmes was getting a lot of love the past few weeks.
Really?
They were just on 2 different wavelengths yesterday, him and Tyrod, though. So that's very unfortunate. And with what we can film, we got, 20 minutes in a pretty long practice. You really get to see that kind of connections of quarterback and wide receiver more than anything else in terms of, like, the closest thing you can get.
It's and that kind of
gameplay. Yeah, so that's why a lot of my big takeaways are going to be receiving core guys.
Well, it's an important part
Andre
of the
Holmes, he's a specimen, and they don't really have a lot. I mean, Zay Jones isn't small. Sammy Watkins certainly isn't small, but they haven't. I mean, Justin Hunter kind of as a unique addition in terms of when and in terms of kind of how he rose to relevance in this offense last year. Justin Hunter was, but an aerial threat. And I look at Andre Holmes; he's just massive. So hopefully he can turn into something like that. And he has found lightning in a bottle a couple times over his career, especially there with the Oakland Raiders.
We know Sammy's the one, if he's healthy. Is there a battle now at 2 between Zay and Andre?
Because I think Zay Jones, at least potential-wise, is the best guy in the receiving core. I would have said before the last couple weeks. Oh, absolutely. Sammy Watkins has to show me a lot more.
Okay.
I would have said it would have been definitely, if we're talking about in a scenario where Sammy is definitely 1 and there's a 2, obviously with how I feel about Zay Jones, he would absolutely be that. But the fact that Andre Holmes has been looking good, not yesterday, in terms of when I could watch and when media could watch film, it's got to be close. Andre Holmes is clearly doing some big things. He's clearly doing some big things.
I heard Trey White looked very good, at least in minicamp, throughout minicamp. That's exciting because it's a position of need. It is an absolute position of need. There's no doubt about it. I wonder how this 6 weeks affects this group now.
Yes.
There's a lot of new pieces, and with Tyrod, I don't know that he's ever really been on the same page as Sammy, simply because Sammy can't stay on the field.
Yeah, I mean, just rests. As
you just mentioned, he struggled to find Andre. I think they had their moments from what it sounds like, and the same sounds like with Zay Jones. You just wonder now how this 6-week layoff, if it does at all, I don't know. It just you would hate for there to be any sort of momentum and then it's all lost going into training camp.
The only thing that'll help them is Tyrod was saying that a lot of them are going to get together in Georgia. And then Trey said in terms of the defensive side of the ball, a lot of them are going to be getting together. I'm not sure at LSU, but I think somewhere in the state of Louisiana.
Okay.
So hopefully that helps because, like you said, a lot of new faces. And they're getting a little bit of role in them in all of these Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday practices. And now if they hadn't coordinated these camps in that 6 weeks, they would maybe lose some of that fire and some of that connection.
It's
so
standard.
Hopefully that really helps.
Yeah.
So that really helps because there's a lot of new faces, more so than I think they're used to, at least in the last half decade, in terms of carryover from one year to the other with this roster for the Bills. So hopefully that helps out. We'll see.
The Bills also announcing their training camp schedule.
Interesting stuff.
So it's shorter. It's shorter than years past by, a week?
So, yeah, it's shorter by a week, and there's only one night practice.
Only one night practice in Rochester. There are two night practices, but one is in Orchard Park. And
yes,
I'll be honest with you, I'm glad I'm not working this camp from a media standpoint. 8:45 practices in the morning, a couple 2:15 practices on a Sunday, but for the most part, head coach sets camp. Sean McDermott is an early riser. I am not. Okay? So 5:30 is not a night practice. That's still an afternoon practice. In my mind, there are no night practices. By the time this ends, it's going to be 7:30. You go ahead, take a picture tonight at 7:30. The sun's still here.
For another couple of hours.
It's not going to get dark until 9 o'clock.
Completely out? Yeah, it's probably another couple of hours.
So one of the things that we loved in the media, and I think the fans got a kick out of this too, is ticketed training camp practices, nighttime practices. So you have to buy a ticket in order to get in at night. And inevitably, you've been to plenty of them. I've been to plenty of them. For the past 3 years, it's been like this under two different head coaches, Marone and Rex. The fans flock to the field. I mean, it is a sight. And every year, someone will tweet out a picture, Fisher, the stands at Growney filled up again. And they are. They always are. People lining the fences. I'm sure they turned down a ton of people to get into these
Human
things.
pyramids. It's everywhere.
I'm disappointed that there aren't any true night-side practices. And I get, listen, training camp is so that this team can prepare, and if this is the difference that gets them into the postseason or gets them to the 10-win mark, no one will care. But it does take away a special part of why you had it at Fisher.
In McDermott, he was very good about saying that he respects the Rochester fans and he respects just the fans in general.
I don't think he does.
He is such about business.
Yes.
The reason he's making all these morning practices, he hopes they have the least amount of eyes and consequently the least amount of distractions on them as possible.
Isn't that kind of like Belichickian almost?
Yes.
That's what it feels like to me. And listen, I think these coaches are aware that fans are what gives them a job. Somewhere in the back of their head, they're aware of that fact. But honestly, I don't think they could care less.
Yeah, but like you said a second ago, it's a very good point to say that I don't think Bills Mafia will care that much. There'll be an iota of care. I have to say that. but they won't care as much, and a lot of the detractors with this decision for training camp will start to dwindle if it produces something on the field.
If it's a 6-win team, I don't think people are going to go back and point to training camp. But I think next time, the next training camp, the 2018 camp, people are going to be like, this didn't work. You know?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's interesting to me. It is. It is interesting. So,
yeah,
camp is done. Bills are, next time we'll see the Buffalo Bills on a field together is training camp at St. John Fisher.
6 of them things.
All right, let's move to LeBron. And he's back on social media and talking to fellow teammates on a podcast, road tripping, with, who is it, Richard Jefferson and Channing Frye. James appearing on the show, and they get into the discussion about super teams. And LeBron saying he didn't start the concept of a super team, saying, no, the 03 Lakers did it with Karl Malone, Gary Payton, Shaq, and Kobe. And in 96, when Jordan retired, the Rockets joined Charles Barkley, Hakeem Olajuwon, and Clyde Drexler on the same team. Any truth to that, Matty?
Well, I'll say for the most part, LeBron went about it a different way with what they did with the Miami Heat because these are his friends. He was going to play with his friends more. You really didn't see that as much with Gary Payton and Karl Malone. They weren't boys as much with those Lakers guys that they joined. And Kevin Durant wasn't boys as much with the guys in the Golden State Warriors. That's a little bit different. You have maybe not Chris Bosh as much, but what they're calling the Banana Boat Boys, which is it's some stupid picture they took on a vacation where they're all looking very excited on a banana boat. So you got Carmelo Anthony, Dwayne Wade, who was a part of this with Miami, LeBron, part of this with Miami, and then Chris Paul. Chris Bosh isn't a part of that, but I think it's much more with that. I'm not saying it's not at least super team adjacent, but it's playing with friends over definitely just eyes on the prize.
Now, when LeBron went to Miami, he and Bosh were free agents. Was Dwayne Wade a free agent at that time? I can't remember.
I don't remember as well.
Because that, to me, is the difference. If you had, and even here, I mean, listen, the 03 Lakers is a bad comparison. Shaq and Kobe are both under contract, and they're the two best players on that team. Gary Payton, obviously, is in the twilight of his career, and so was Karl Malone. He was simply there to get a ring. James will be, I think history will credit LeBron with creating these super teams simply because of the Miami experiment. I think it's two superstar free agents joining up with a third superstar and them talking about it all summer. I think the press conference he has, the half an hour long press conference or whatever it was it an hour long or an hour?
Wait. It was an hour long or an hour? That's the same thing.
Half an hour or an hour.
I'm like, I don't know what to pick. I'm picking hour. I think it was an hour.
It was an hour. So he has this hour-long press conference to say one sentence. I'm taking my talents to South Beach. That's all he needed to say. He could have said it in a tweet. He could have told it to a reporter. He made a spectacle of this thing. So, did he really create this? Maybe not. But he's going to get the credit for it. If you're going to hold an hour-long press conference at some Boys and Girls Club in Connecticut that you didn't really do anything for, you're going to get credit for this.
Yeah, but we can't let that cloud what's real. Like, I think it started beforehand. I definitely did. I'm not saying it's not super team adjacent, but the fact, free agency changes as well. We saw it most recently again with the CBA stuff.
In 96.
In terms of there being more money, but I don't think that he started the fact that you could have all these stars on one team, if you really want to break down the definition of it.
I don't think the 03 Lakers are a super team. Two of those four pieces are just names at that point. 96, Clyde's on the tail end there. Right? I would think Clyde Drexler's on the tail end of the career there. Hakeem and Barkley still big. You got three. when LeBron goes in what was it, 2010, 11, somewhere in there, you have 3 stars all in their prime meeting on one team, and 2 of them choosing to go there.
Like, everyone hates the decision until they can latch it on to. I'm not saying you're doing that. Until they can latch it on to something negative about LeBron. Like that's when we can use it positively.
Listen, this is what I wanted out of LeBron. This is what I wanted. He said after the finals he doesn't believe he was on a super team. BS. You were on a super team. You got Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love, and you got your hand-picked guard in Korver, and LeBron's the GM of that team. Whether he wants to admit it or not, he's the GM of that team. And there's no doubt in my mind he's the head coach, GM, and star athlete. Okay? All you need to say is, you know what? We got together a great group of guys. We made a run at it. And guess what? Golden State was better this series. But you know what? We're going to relook at things in the offseason, and I'm going to try to get a team, and I'm going to try to attract some free agents here. Boom! End of story. Because he did it before. And guys are... It's a known fact, and it's an accepted fact that guys will try to recruit their friends to come and play with them. Okay, that's the way of the league now. That's all you need to say. And on this podcast, all you need to say is, listen, whether we are a super team or not, that's for the media to decide. I liked our group of guys. I'm going to do whatever I can while I'm under contract with this team to try to go and win a championship and one-up Golden State. They got a tremendous group of guys, and that's a tough group to beat. Obviously, we lost 4-1. That's what you say.
My problem with what he said there, that statement that you just mentioned a second ago from him, is that if you're going to define a super team as a team with multiple stars, with a few star players that deserve that billing, that's what their skills deserve.
Yep.
And I think it throws some of his teammates under the bus a little bit by saying that they're not deserving of star status to be part of a super team. That was my first takeaway when I saw that statement.
That's a good point.
In that regard, if we're going to define it that way, they absolutely were a super team. They had a few big-time stars.
I agree. I do agree. All right. Anything else on LeBron?
No, I think it's pretty good. It's pretty delectable.
This Sunday on the show, we're going to be talking hockey, U.S. Open. Ashley Carter going to join the show. We're still working out the deets of our reporter guest, so I cannot at this time say over the interwebs and have
first
it live
name,
there
last
forever.
name.
What's that?
We're bringing on first name, last name.
First name, last name will be on.
Notes of stuff.
Something, Twitter. Ashley Carter, FOTS, our female correspondent, lovely.
I think she's above FOTS. She's like on the staff.
She's the lady FOTS.
I think she's our female correspondent. She's the FC. It's FC Ashley Carter.
FC Ashley Carter.
Little footy.
Show. So check out archived episodes of the podcast on iTunes, Google Play. I'm sure no one has listened all the way through this, so I hope they check out the podcast.
Now we can just swear a bunch.
And yeah, that's all I got. Anything else, bud?